Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Nicole Crowder, and this is How I Create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. Welcome back to This Is How We Create. Today we have Nicole Crowder in the guest chair. Nicole is a furniture designer and upholsterer whose global upbringing shaped her deep appreciation for design in all its international forms. Before discovering her true passion for upholstery, Nicole honed her skills as a photo editor. This fine understanding of art direction instilled in her a deep love for crafting immersive vignettes that create life in her finished upholstery pieces. In this conversation, Nicole shares how to find and maintain your artistic voice. More importantly, she gives great advice on how to tune your artistic voice and vision, particularly when negotiating brand partnerships. Her next big project will be to work more deeply in the world of textile and textile design. Let's turn our attention to Nicole's bio. Nicole Crowder Upholstery is a modern furniture and upholstery studio creating innovative, one of a kind pieces of furniture and home furnishings. Nicole released her first custom furniture collection with retailer World Market in 2022. Nicole's work spans commercial, hospitality, and editorial clients. Her work has been commissioned by leading hotels and restaurants across the country. You might have spied her work in leading design publications such as Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, Martha Stewart Magazine, Design Milk, Domino.com, and many more. I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation with Nicole. We had such great fun talking about design and about her journey to working with textiles with upholstery. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin. I am your host, and today in the guest chair, I am so pleased to welcome Nicole Crowder. Welcome,
Hello,
Nicole.
Martine. I'm so excited to be here with you in conversation. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to chat with you because I've followed your career from afar. And I think I stumbled across you and maybe it was 2014. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a while.
A minute.
It's been a good minute. And so I'm pleased to chat with you about your journey from childhood to now to what you have coming up next
Mm.
as not only through upholstery, but also now mostly as a surface designer. Is that how what you're calling yourself now?
I mostly do furniture design and upholstery, but it is definitely broadening to like writing and creating patterns, mostly for like specific projects. But I would say like the furniture designer is still what I do. It's just expanded so much.
Well, we're going to get to that. First, I'd love for you to chat with us a little bit about you and what you were like as a child. Where did you grow up and how did your childhood influence your work now or your creative work?
So I was born a military kid, an army brat, some would kind of say. And my parents were both in the military. And I was born in Germany on a military base. And then we bounced around a lot when I was a kid. We traveled to Germany, we were in Japan, we were in South Korea, all along the East Coast. The southern part of the United States, a couple of like northern states as well. But traveling as I was growing up really just opened my sense of curiosity about people, cultures, music, food. Truly, living in Asia specifically is where my palate was just burst wide open in terms of like what things tasted like and textures. And I feel like that's left one of the biggest imprints on me just in terms of wanting to explore design. Design is so rich throughout Asia. I mean, really all over the place, of course, but it's just woven into the tapestry of like where you live. And so growing up, I was surrounded by great design, beautiful colors, a lot of like contrasting elements. And I can tell so deeply how that's continued to be a thread throughout my work. I love mixing patterns, I love mixing textures and textiles, and I'm just a naturally curious person. So it's been, if I didn't have that part of me where I'm just, there's no reservation about going up to ask someone about their story or about how they do a thing or, where they sort of got this inspiration from, or this idea for something. All of that is from my childhood, from being a introverted, shy, middle child who kind of explored my sense of imagination and expression through books, through drawing and art. And now I'm able to sort of feed that inner child through the work that I get to do every single day. And it's incredible.
From what I understand from
Mhm.
college, you started your career, well, after college, you started your career as an intern at Essence Magazine and InStyle
Yeah.
Magazine. You went on to work as a photo editor at the Washington Post, correct?
Yes, I started as an intern with Essence Magazine in their photo department, and then that just really like exposed me to what photo editors do. I had never even heard of a photo editor when I was interning, and they helped me sort of get this position at AARP, the first company that I worked for. It was geared towards the 50 plus population, and I was working with their magazine in DC at the time. My first full-time job, my eyes were wide open for the experiences. And it was just incredible learning how to package something with other designers and art directors and fellow photo editors. And I really just became sort of enamored with publications in general. And that's where like the seeds were planted. And from there, I moved over to the Washington Post. I interned with InStyle as well. I did some work with National Geographic Traveler, all these sort of dream places for me where I was able to like, create the visual narrative in collaboration with editors. It was such a great form of storytelling that I just didn't realize. I love to read stories, but getting a space to tell them in a really visual way was so impactful. Curating and developing an eye for curation, for looking at a whole frame, for making sure that you see the big picture and what are all the moving parts to make that big picture come to life. Again, would unbeknownst to me, would later inform my upholstery work and the fact that I could take those elements of photo editing and design, still be able to incorporate them into a completely different discipline.
One of the things that, or one of the people that photographers are always drawn to are photo editors because in so many ways that they're the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
They help us tell better stories. They have the eye in the
Yeah.
figuring out what images will tell a story super, super well, will relate to the reader.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I can only imagine how, if you had continued down that
Oh
road,
my
I
gosh.
potentially could have had a portfolio review with you at some point.
Oh, let me tell you, those are one of my favorite things to do because my passion really was just like identifying emerging photographers, burgeoning photographers who already have incredible talent, but it's just like tapping them to do great stories. And those portfolio reviews that I would go to, I met some great friends, people to this day, like who I've known for 10 years now, started out with portfolio reviews. And I do think sometimes like, oh, what would it be like to be back in that pocket, working with magazines and being able to just look at a ton of images and figure out what's the story around them. I am a magazine girl to my heart. So to this day, I'm still combing through them and like looking in the margins to see what's the photo credit. I literally, I have a magazine next to me from the local publication here in Minneapolis, St. Paul Home and Design. And I'm like, let me flip through and see who took all these pictures because photography is such a big part of my heart and my spirit. And I hope it's always that way.
Yeah, I mean, especially now, right?
Mm.
Through your
Yeah.
work, because I'm assuming that as you put together campaigns around your work, that are you actually photo directing or do you just know?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh yes, honey. Like I'm so hands-on with that because I just love it. I love art direction. One of my best girlfriends is an art director who we worked at the same publication together. That's how we met. And we are always, figuring out, okay, what's the textile that goes here? What's the mug that goes here? What direction is the spoon tilted in? And so when I'm thinking of my own, sort of art direction for my chairs, I was just in my studio this afternoon figuring out, okay, what's the placement of the bookshelf? And then, there's a lamp over here, the plant, I want to turn that a little bit because I'm conscious at all times of what I want the focus to be of an image and how everything around it works in tandem to make sure that that object is elevated in the focus. And with furniture, I want it to feel like it's in a vignette so that you as a potential buyer or customer can see it in your home. But I also always am thinking of my pictures as like, how do I elevate the chair to look like its own form of art? I want it to feel sculptural. It's on a platform someplace. And it's not because I like over revere an object, but it's just like I love the idea of elevating an object and making you see it in a different way, whether it's, natural light or studio light or this plant somehow the dimensions of that make the chair's dimension, kind of skew that a little bit. I'm always playing around with, creating vignettes. One of my it's a running joke with me and my friends how vignette is one of my favorite words. But yes, if I can like see it in my mind, I love playing around with it to become actualized in a little square or so.
Well, so we know that okay, I know our listeners might not know, but as we started chit-chatting about what we were going to cover in this conversation, I think I told you very specifically that I wanted to talk a little bit about brand partnerships and about licensing because there's such a wealth of information that is already out there on your journey to how you came to be where you are now. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but could you give me like just a short, I guess, recap of how you started getting interested in upholstery to basically having an upholstery business that took off, and then now you are in a different phase of your business where you have brand partnerships and are doing more things, which we'll talk about later.
It's even surreal to hear that, going from like working in my studio to like having brand partnerships is so surreal to think about in this time frame. But I started truly like 2012, sort of unofficially working out of my home at the time that I was sharing with a friend and exploring like, wow, finally looking at chairs and seeing them as not just practical things that I sit in, but something that I could really transform. And that's where my curiosity was piqued. I started playing around with furniture, small items like dining room chairs, little pop cushion seats, singular seats here and there, to gradually graduating to ottomans and benches, and then eventually couches and settees and sectionals. Those items I was selling at farmers markets initially. And it was fantastic. Anytime somebody came around and was like, how much is this? Getting a sale was the highlight right there. And eventually I just continued to expand working with residential clients, people who had, an heirloom chair here and there that had been in their family for years. That was so much word of mouth built around it because at the time, this was 2013, 2014 in DC, there just wasn't a really big market for upholsterers, especially young Black upholsterers like myself who were doing really bold, unique pieces. So I was able to tap into that market of folks who wanted something super different than what was available to them in other stores. And I started just building up a residential clientele. And that expanded into hotels and restaurants and more commercial clients across DC, which was fantastic and was like a long-term dream of mine to be able to work with those kind of entities. And that happened within the first year or so of me starting. And then through that process, I moved from like one big studio to a bigger studio, which just allowed me to expand the capabilities for the furniture that I could work on. And it was not just residential clients, but it became like hospitality clients and people who were in the film industry. And that's when I was thinking like, oh man, there's all new possibilities for where my work could be. June of 2020, I remember it vividly. I was in my studio working on a chair and I happened to check my email and I saw an email from World Market and they were asking if I was ever interested in producing my own furniture and fabric collection. And I was just like, hello, I think I dropped my phone because it was such a surreal moment, something I had been, hoping would happen, but didn't expect to happen for like, 10 years into my career at that point, because I'm just a small person working in DC, who knows me. It was so wonderful at first because they were super acknowledgeable of the fact that they hadn't used Black designers previously with their furniture collections. And so they wanted my signature of bold prints, contrasting fabrics and patterns. And I could basically provide sketches for the furniture that I wanted to create. So it was very collaborative starting out, but I was thinking to myself, I was like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I've never done licensing before. I don't know how to negotiate royalties or any of that. And I didn't even know who to ask. Justina Blakeney, who is just an incredible person, designer, all around creative, woman and powerhouse. So gracious. And I was so grateful to her because I emailed her just to see would she be able to help me negotiate or navigate through this because, she was the queen of having partnerships and licensing with Target and, Opal House and many other brands. And I was so just like blown away and grateful that she took time to really be transparent with me about what to ask for, what to look for, and what to make sure I included in my contracts. So my best friend, her sister is a lawyer because I didn't even know where to find a lawyer. I was like, what is an entertainment lawyer? What kind of attorney do I need for this process? I know I cannot negotiate these terms on my own. And she was amazing at culling through the initial contract that we had with them. And I'm so glad she did because the jargon, I had a headache just trying to read through and figure out what it meant. But there were a lot of terms in there, and having someone who truly is an advocate for you is critical because she was able to help me negotiate a higher fee, a higher royalty fee to make sure that long term, this work belonged to me and that my name would continue to like travel with this work. Just little parts that I probably myself wouldn't have been cognizant to even ask for. And through this process of working with a huge brand who was coming to you, I slowly had to let go of this mindset that you know, um, I should just be like grateful that they reached out to me, that I couldn't advocate for myself when I felt like certain design decisions did not feel or look like me, or that the language in the contract or the language for this particular part of the process just did not feel right. And it was a lot of listening to my intuition because I did not have a manager. I still don't. Do not have an agent. It's just me advocating in this space for myself day to day with this huge brand. And I really had to take off the hat that like you're just grateful to be at this table and they've reached out to you. It was like, no, you're a businesswoman. This is your whole name on these pieces. And I wanted to make sure that if it was going to be licensed and sold, that it had to be in alignment and there was this reciprocity to where I was 100% happy with what went out into the world on all terms. And so it was such a big exercise in saying yes and no to certain things, being able to not just do that in emails, but being able to do that over the phone, in person. I just built up this muscle of like, I'm the prize and this work is my signature. This work will travel with me no matter where I go. And how I show up is professional, but it's also very clear. And it's also very intentional with like what I'm trying to present. And it was, the collection was named after the women in my family who really supported me. So there was no way I was going to just let this become something, that did not feel like it was supported in the best way. And so I bumped up against some things I didn't expect in the way of support from a large brand. And that also made me realize everybody doesn't know how to treat you, and you have to tell them. You have to tell them who you are. It does not matter if it is multi-million dollar brand or a small, hometown brand. You can say, this is how I want my work to exist in the world, and this is how I want us to work together. And so working with that.
Sorry, can I ask
Oh, yeah.
more specifically if you're okay sharing what are some of the things that you bumped up against?
Sure, absolutely. I one of the initial things was with the design. It was my work is all based on mixing and matching contrasting prints. Rarely do I use one print for a whole piece. And there was a point in the beginning or sort of midway through where they wanted me to like use these fabrics that they were beautiful, but it was like one fabric for the whole piece. And I was like, that's not who I am, basically. This is not a piece that I would put out. And so there was this back and forth of like, well, we can't find the matching color that you want to do this other fabric. And I was confused by that because the same company was making both of these fabrics. And I just didn't understand why we couldn't do a color match to a fabric they had already provided me with. So it was the lack of communication with some of these emails and having to consistently follow up and not hearing back for like a month, sometimes 2 months later. There was no transparency with the timeline at all. So I was like, where are we in this process and what is owed to you and what is owed to me? What are the deadlines? Big issue for me, however, or one of the big issues came down to just the visuals of how this collection was going to be presented into the world. My understanding because we had discussed this during a meeting at the headquarters, was there was a marketing person or team who would be handling like the visuals for this, the photo shoots and all that stuff. So I, of course, my background being photo editing, I was like, oh, I'm more than happy if you know to help with like the creative direction or thinking of a concept for how to photograph things in the studio, etc. No response from that. Fast forward 5 months, and at this point, it's probably May or June, and the collection is supposed to come out in January, meaning, photos should be taken so that they can be sent out to press outlet. And I hadn't heard back anything. So they reached out to me a month after and said, hey, we'd love to get a headshot to send for press outlets, to sort of to get interviews going. And I was like, wonderful. A friend of mine had taken a few headshots of me several months prior because I got a new studio. At that time, I had a new wig. So I was like, we're going to get these shots. I sent them those photographs. And they write me back and say, okay, great. Which one can we use for the in-store graphic? And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, you have to pay the photographer a commercial rate to use these pictures since they're going to be for a nationwide campaign. And that seemed to just completely go right over their head to where they were like, well, we don't have budget to pay for these pictures. So I was like, well, what did you expect? How were you expecting to promote the collection if you don't have budget for photography, if this wasn't even considered? And so I got on the phone with the head of the furniture department essentially, and she understood automatically that I was frustrated with this. And I said, there was no thought, you all had no intention of doing a photo shoot to promote this collection. You were just hoping to use a free image that I happened to take on my, with the photographer that I already paid for a whole campaign. That doesn't make sense to me. And I said, this feels a bit like, you were wanting to work with a Black designer for optics to show that you all were using a Black designer. And I really, I had to call them out on that because the communication with them was making me feel like I wasn't being heard. And they very quickly, the next day, I got an email and was like, you know what? We've set up a photo shoot. We've got a team. We've got hair and makeup and photographer. We're going to fly you out to our headquarters. And that's how I got the pictures that have been circulating on my Instagram, on their website. They didn't even have a press team in place to basically help promote this collection. I was getting ready to hire my own press team. This is where we were when randomly I got an email from editor at Architectural Digest and another editor at Business of Home who just happened, to read about me in a different publication and wanted to talk about the collection. But I was just really disheartened by the lack of overall vision, for support for my collaboration with World Market. I think I was just kind of shell shocked too at like my assumption was this brand kind of had a sense for what they were doing with working with a designer. And what I learned was like over communication. If you're going to err on any side, is err on the side of over communication. That you, as the creative, the maker, have every right to ask multiple questions, to get super granular as you need to ask for all of the like. I negotiated an increase in my royalties. I was just like, what you offered me is good, but I know that I am valued at more. I know this collection is valued at more, so I asked for more. And it never hurts to advocate for yourself when you're coming with really good intentions and when you can provide like receipts for that. Anything at any point if they wanted to come and ask me, but why? But why? I had an answer because I understood my business model, I understood my value, I understood that you had approached me about contributing to your platform. So there was that understanding that perhaps they didn't know who they were, getting involved with, but I surely did.
All I have to say is Suki Suki.
Listen, you
Wow, so
got
that's
to
so
know.
interesting.
Mhm,
Yeah, but I mean, from the outside, it looked like fairy dust was just
mhm.
sprinkled. And from what I understand, this whole process took about 2 years
2 years.
before.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, it was going through a pandemic and there was tons of delays with shipping and delivery because the bulk of the products were made in India. And so the shipping timeline, I'm sure, increased when the collection, not when it came out, but just maybe some things being finished. Fabric was a big expense to ship. But I also think there was just a really small team and they were also in transition. So there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that I was also learning. I'm like, oh, okay, you guys don't have an in-house X team and there's only one person as opposed to a whole team doing this. Whereas, my understanding from friends who've worked with other brands, it's like there's infrastructure that is in place. They have like a 2-year lead time and they are hitting beats every single month up to that point because this is just what they do. They're very aware of the process of partnerships with brands. And I think World Market was they released a wave of Black artists, but they were all working with them at the same time. And there wasn't that learning curve of like, oh, this was what we did, with this person's partnership that we need to course correct. It was just like building as you kind of, go. And I wasn't used to that. And not even from a licensing standpoint, because again, this was my first licensing opportunity, but from a standpoint of like, we're releasing a product. So therefore, we're working months backwards to ensure everything is airtight and buttoned up. And that comes from my experience working as a photo editor for Netflix. Long leads on those projects, you had to work months backwards to make sure you hit all the beats. Same thing with the Washington Post, same thing with Essence, same thing with AARP. So for me, it was just like, okay, you need to put another hat on here. Go ahead and do that now because you have to let go of the expectation that they are driving the car.
One thing to me that is so remarkable is that you were just prepared for this. And you know how they talk about luck is when opportunity meets, I forget what it's called,
Yeah.
when preparedness,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I just, as you were recounting the story, I could just imagine that, you and Justina Blakely, I think you were both in the Company of Women, right? You were both
Yeah.
featured.
Well, she was featured. I wasn't, but I mean, I look at that book all the time. It was
Oh, you weren't,
incredible.
I feel some reason I think that
No,
maybe it was Lisa Hunt.
I was I think it was a later book, but Grace
Oh,
Bonney is such a dear friend. That book was one of the ones where I was like a fangirl meeting her, but I did a panel with her about that book. And I was just like, Grace, from here on out, we go together. She's
oh,
just so
she's
fantastic.
awesome.
She's amazing. I look at that book all the time. It's so good.
Oh, I have it
Yeah.
behind me. But I just think about all of the relationships that you made over time where you were able to tap into your network to be able to
Yes.
gain clarity and set yourself up for success. So from there, you seem to be keeping busy. You recently had several pieces of content that you created for Home 52.
Yes. I love
Yeah. And how do you continue to manage these brand partnerships that you have coming your way? And now that you've learned such a big lesson through this world market partnership, what are some things that you've decided that you're not going to do in the future?
Great question. I think it was like a two-part question. I'll go to the second one first because that's about what I learned from this that I'll take with me. A big one is to just take more time reading the contract and not feeling the sense of urgency that, if you don't do it now or today, it's going to, dissipate. It's going to be lost. And that's not true. It's like I really, just in general, I am training myself a little more to pause for everything. Pause before I'm saying yes to something or committing to something. Pause before I like speak about something. And especially, with this, uh, with something that has your name and long-term ramifications. For hopefully for the better, of course. I think it is sitting with information and combing through it a few times just to make sure it feels good in my gut and my spirit, and that by saying yes to this thing is a resounding yes. I also learned, like, just for me going forward, is having more of a team in place too. At the time, it was, I was just 3 years into upholstery, wasn't really thinking of myself in terms of content creation or negotiating bigger deals down the road. I was perfectly comfortable negotiating, my individual client contracts and rates, but it taught me so much of like, I don't want to be doing a lot of that front facing work, in the sense of I'm also negotiating the rate that I get and the royalties. So it's getting a team in place that can help facilitate that can advocate for me on this end, the same way the business on their end has someone advocating for them. And it's just like, great, this opportunity sounds good. I'm super happy to do that work. I can knock it out. And my manager then can take over and be like, wonderful, here are the terms, here is the rate, because they also can see the vision for where I want to go with my business. And I just have another voice to advocate for me, and also to remind me sometimes, like, you said you wanted to do this, but you're saying less, or you're saying yes to something that's less. That is a really critical component, I think, in the same way of having, a partner who is supportive, or friends who are supportive of what you're doing, because it keeps you accountable For licensing, one of the other things I've learned is more SKUs. It's better. Having, for me, more pieces that I can put out into the world, and one for my imagination, but also just in terms of like the accessibility points that people can get to my work makes me happier. Like the chairs have been one thing, but I've over the course of my business, I've just learned like people want more takeaway items too because they want to invest in you, but sometimes they can't make that deep investment of, thousands of dollars on a particular piece, but they can buy a pillow, they can buy a napkin ring, maybe they can come to a retreat, they can buy a fixture that you have on the table. So I've I've challenged myself, and you mentioned this, like the opportunities kind of meeting the opportunity when it came because I was prepared. I have been just sketching a lot more, getting back into that rhythm of like, what do I want to see created in the world, whether I make it myself or I'm working with a brand partner to do that. The reason I was even able to step into that world market partnership was because I already had tons of sketches, that I had been percolating and thinking about, ready to present to them and finesse. So I would say, have your vision already kind of, if not completely worked out or fleshed out, just have a sketch, a skeleton idea so that you can speak more confidently to what you want to create with this brand versus they dictate, what you are creating. And you had a first part of the question. I'm so sorry, I'm a chatter. So I apologize if I'm rambling, but you had a part one of your question that I think I.
Which I don't quite remember.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Because I
Martine.
was so like into what you were saying. Let me
I
see. I
get
have
to talking.
um
I think you asked
oh,
about.
I think I mentioned how you managed the relationships.
Yes.
Well, we could move on because
Okay.
I honestly
I'm over here just talking, girl. You got to stop me.
honestly sometimes I shoot from the hip. I have like a list of questions and then ideas pop in my head.
Sure.
And so you've talked a lot about how you love the color green.
Yes, that's my
Um,
fave.
and you talk about how you love textiles. And do I understand correctly that you are starting to maybe even develop your own textile?
Yes. I was kept saying to myself for a few years, like, I don't know how to do that, and then so many signs and synchronicities have been popping up to say, like, this is the next thing that you should be creating for yourself or for the work and for people to engage with. I just met with a fantastic fabric company that's actually based in Minneapolis. I didn't know that this whole time. It's called Charlotte Fabrics. I thought they were in Charlotte, North Carolina, but they are right here outside of Minneapolis. And we met, one, to collaborate with them, but then also, I'm dreaming up like what's a possibility of to create my own fabrics could look like. And green is certainly, a top color that I would love to work with because it reminds me so much of like my grandmother, who is also an Aries, who also green is her favorite color, who really taught me about archiving everything, like she gave me my first journal, she gave me my first like brownie camera. And so when I think of that color, it reminds me of like life, of rebirth, of energy, of love, and it reminds me of her. And so I want to infuse that color with, in anything that I'm working on in some sort of way. But the textiles would be incredible for me to create my own collection. I have a fantastic friend named Hadia Williams who is a surface designer and a pattern maker, and she and I are working together on a big project that's it'll be in 2024, which we can't announce just yet. We don't have permission to do so, but it is. I mean, that project right there is going to be the biggest that yet in my career that I have done, and it heavily involves textiles and custom upholstery. So I feel like the universe has been saying this is, another arena for you to play in. And that's been really fun because I love the discovery phase of any sort of, process, whether professionally or personally.
Oh gosh, I'm so excited for you.
Me
And
too.
is Hadia the one who created the domino fabric? Is she or
No, that
no?
was Anicia Durka.
Okay.
Yes, another fantastic friend. She works for P. Kaufman. And very serendipitous how I came across her. I used that fabric and then I tagged P. Kaufman, but then she somehow found me and she messaged me on Instagram and said, hey, I'm so happy you love that fabric. I designed it. This whole time I'm using this fabric, had no idea it was designed by a Black woman. And when she and I got on a Zoom call to chat, she was just sharing me the process photographer, how she works, with an agency. She basically oversees all the designs, that they have, and she will just, she drafts out a bunch of different designs, and then they look at a bunch of different colorways to make these, and then they decide, okay, what's the material? Is it linen? Is it jacquard? Is it twill? And they produce this beautiful fabric work. And I'm like, it's the coolest job. I love that she is the face of it, or behind the scenes. It just, that whole world is fascinating to me about how fabric is made. Truly, how do you get a design from like your computer to this material? I don't know. So I have lots of questions, and it's exciting, and she's phenomenal.
Well, I'm so pleased for you. I think one of the things that really excites me about the work that you're doing, not only because of, you're just an amazing person and a great personality, but you are actively writing the history of African Americans in furniture design and in textile design. Like you are, I can see some historian typing
Oh,
all
it's
of
like,
those things that you're doing.
it's so funny you said that, because literally I just started working with a book agent, and I haven't even announced this anywhere publicly, but I am researching. I'm in the early beta stage of writing a book on the heritage of Black American craft. And I am digging into these stories, historical notes and journals, but also profiling in a very robust way Black designers today, contemporary people who work with weaving and furniture and leather and textiles and fabric and wood, to cull our stories together, because that's my passion most. I think with all of my work, I know at the heart of it is amplifying the collective work, of the community. I love what I do and that people get to engage in it. But if it's not also being able to amplify other incredible people and their process and their journeys, I'm a little less interested. So this book is a passion project. I have no idea how long it will take me to write it, because the research, I'm looking at it now like, ooh, cha, it's a lot, but I'm so incredibly excited to hopefully one day bring this to life and be able to share these stories and these anecdotes in a way that hasn't in sort of the style been documented. So yes, when that is done, I will be sure to let you know.
Please do. I will pre-order.
Yes, please,
It's
thank you.
open the pre-orders.
Okay, that is the word.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. I am just over the moon to chat with you,
Thank you,
and I can't
Martine.
wait to just follow you and keep seeing that star of yours shining.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This has been a blessing. I'm grateful to you and to your audience, your warmth. This has been a highlight of my day. So thank you.
Thank you.